Great. Woo, Dallas. Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. I think most of you know what the agenda is. We're going to start initially with talking about an overview, just a high-level overview of Tableau 10.0. And the speaker for that session is Joshua Milligan. Some of you probably know him. He is one of 21 Zen Masters in the world, and he is a second-year Zen Master, so we're very excited to have Joshua on our team. But Joshua's going to give you an overview, presentation form a little bit, and then actually go into a demo of 10.0 for those of you that haven't seen it. Then we will take a break, and then we will have a deep dive session, a deeper session that Joshua will speak about 10.0, going through the features and the functions and so forth of the product. And then we will break into a session where we will have, Tom, you want to stand up? I'm going to introduce you right now. This is Tom Laney from Southwest Airlines. He's in corporate strategy. And we'll go into a little bit when we get to that break, but I did want to identify all of our speakers today. Tom will be speaking about Southwest data and visualization strategy and how they've done it. So you guys are really in for a big treat. Joshua Milligan, I'd like to have him come forth. Joshua, like I said, is a Zen Master. He is also a Tableau social ambassador, and he was also named one of 39 Tableau visualization experts in the world. So welcome, Joshua.
All right, how's everyone doing? How many of you are excited about Tableau 10? All right. Well, we're going to get into it. We're going to have a couple of sessions here. The first session is going to be just an overview. We're going to look at Tableau. We're going to see some things that have been there for a while, for the last several versions, but you will see some new features in Tableau 10. And you'll see them throughout. And then the next section, we'll take a deep dive into Tableau 10, and you'll see some of the incredible features. You've seen some of them scrolling by here, but that's it for PowerPoint today, at least for me. I am shutting it down because we're going to do everything else in Tableau. All right, so Tableau 10. We've got a whole bunch of new features here. It's a major release. I counted somewhere around 45 major new features, and then there are little ones that the developer slipped in without even advertising it, but all kinds of things. And you're going to see a lot of these as we go through the demos. I broke them down kind of into some categories here, like analytics. And so there are things like automating some of the geographic roles. Tableau has done that well for a long time, but it gets better with Tableau 10. Clustering. How many of you have heard of clustering? All right. We'll see it in action. It is powerful. We've got some continuous bar charts and the sizing of marks that has been improved. Custom territories. That'll be exciting. Some new predictive service features there. Groups and calculations. We'll see all kinds of things. Highlighters and that sort of thing. And then, how many of you use Tableau Server? Or Tableau Online? Or even Tableau Public? All right, there are a whole lot of new features here. Things like data source analytics. So if you want to see how many workbooks, how many views there are for your different data sources, if you want to see what kind of connection types, the ability to see your data sources has been there for a while, but there's a lot of analytics built around it now. There are some browser optimizations that you won't really see, but you'll experience as things will be a lot faster. New ways of managing licenses. How many of you who use Tableau Server have ever had an extract fail for some reason in the middle of the night, and you don't find out about it until you get the phone call in the morning from the people who need their dashboards working? Yeah, a few of you? More than a few of you. Yeah. So, how many of you would like to get a notification when the extract actually fails? Not as many? Really? I would have expected everybody to raise their hand. No, you do. You want to know right away. So, Tableau 10, you'll get that notification right away when the extract fails. You can fix it before your manager sees it the next morning. All kinds of new things. Revision history. So 9.3 introduced the idea that when you publish a workbook to Tableau Server, it saves a version of that, and you could actually download that an older version, republish, and then things would work well. But Tableau 10 takes it to the next level because now you can choose a revision and you can immediately revert to that version on Tableau server. So none of this downloading, republishing, and all kinds of things that take time. The ability to subscribe other users, and one that I'm really excited about, web authoring of dashboards. How many of you are excited about that? A few, yeah, no, this is really exciting. So for a while we've been able to build visualizations in a web browser using Tableau Server, but now you can build out the entire dashboard. So that whole process is Tableau Server oriented now. And then some of my favorite new features are all around the data and the data integration. So things like cross data source filters. How many of you have been frustrated at times you're working with multiple data sources and you want to be able to filter them all? Yeah, I see some hands. So before you had some options, you could create some parameters, but those are a static list of values. You could maybe create a calculated field or do a few other things, some action filters maybe, but they all had their drawbacks. Now you can create a filter that goes across data sources. And then my all-time favorite feature here, cross-database join. We'll look at how you can join tables across different data sources. So SQL Server and Oracle and Excel and Google Sheets, you can join all of those together now, and Tableau works seamlessly among all of those. I mentioned Google Sheets, and there is a new connector for Google Sheets. It's incredible. We'll see it today. Some other data sources are now available, so things like Marketo, Cisco Information Server, some others there. I'll point them out, we won't necessarily look at them. On-demand connections, so Tableau Server gets really smart about which connections it needs for a dashboard and doesn't try to load them all up at once. QuickBooks Online, if any of you are using that. Union, so this was a feature that was in Tableau 9. But it gets even better with Tableau 10. So we have things like a wildcard. So in Tableau 9, you had to select the files that you wanted to be union together. Now you can give it a wildcard match, and you can union together different Excel documents. Even Google Sheets can be unioned. So all kinds of really cool things around union. We'll take a look at that. How many of you use the APIs? Yeah, just a few. We're not gonna dive into the APIs today, but there are some really cool new features with APIs. There's a new API. It's the Document API, so you can actually programmatically modify a Tableau workbook now. ETL refresh. There's a whole new web data connector. So if any of you are ever interested in programmatically interacting with Tableau, they continue to make those APIs even better and introduce new ones with each new version as well. And then some things that you'll notice, and I'll try to point a few of them out, but it's not something that you'll have to worry about actually doing anything about. It's just beautiful. And it's seamless. And Tableau 10 looks like a whole new application. Now, you'll still recognize it. You'll still be able to use it right away. It's not going to be foreign to you, but it just looks good. And there are new fonts, new default color schemes, all kinds of really cool things that we'll see. So a whole new UI, seamless titles. I'll point some of these out. And then how many of you like to use mobile? Okay, how many of you would like to use mobile, but you haven't been able to make it work very well with Tableau? Yeah. So right now, if I build a dashboard in Tableau 9 and I publish that to the server, it's probably something that looked great on my desktop, but not necessarily great on somebody's iPad or iPhone or tablet. There are all kinds of new features in Tableau 10 for a device designer, so that we'll take a look at that, where you can actually build dashboards that are specific to devices, and Tableau will swap it out depending on the device that's used. There's a new Android app, so I like that because I'm an Android user. I downloaded that, and now I can manage my Tableau server from my Android phone, and that's already out. The rest of it is still in beta. And then some other device management and streamlined sign-in, other things for mobile, all kinds of really cool things. All right, so that's sort of an overview, but let's go into it. Let's take a look at Tableau 10. In fact, we are looking at Tableau 10. This is Tableau 10 Beta 4, which, from what I've heard, is the last beta, so we are probably a week or two away from the production release of Tableau 10. And I don't expect that much will change between now and then, but there may be a few things, so a little caveat there. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the data set that we'll work with today. So I'm going to create a new data source, and you'll notice a few of the things here. So there's the new Cognito connection, and if I scroll down, there's MemSQL and some of these new connections. Right now, I'm just going to connect to SQL Server. So we'll just keep it simple. Connect to SQL Server. I'm going to choose a database called Real Estate. And what I'm going to look at today is just a simple table called Real Estate Listings. And if we take a look at that, the data source is simply one row per address per real estate listing. So I've got the address, I've got the year the house was built, and then other things that I'd be interested in if I was trying to analyze what kind of house I wanted to buy, how many bedrooms, bathrooms, the price, the square footage, the date listed. So that's going to be our data source that we'll start with right now. And when I get a new data source, most of the time, unless I've been given some specific requirements, most of the time I'm going to sit down and try to understand the data source. So my role at first is just to explore it, to understand it. So as I look at this, there might be a little bit of cleanup, so number of bathrooms and bedrooms. Those are things that describe the house. I guess you could measure them, but I'm going to call those dimensions. And if I look now, we've got a pretty good breakdown. So I've got address, the date listed, and what I might be interested in doing is just taking a look and seeing, okay, how many records of data do I have? Okay, so I've got 421. Now, how many of you can read the text? This monitor's here, this projector's kind of interesting. So a lot of you in the front, a lot of you in the back are kind of wondering right now. Well, usually, this is a struggle I have when I'm presenting, is what do I do about that? So maybe I try to adjust the resolution, maybe I try to format the font and stuff, but in previous versions of Tableau, when I went to go format the font, I have to do it for every sheet in the workbook, every view. In Tableau 10, I go up to Format on the menu and select Workbook, and I can set the font throughout the entire workbook. So let's bump that up. Notice the new font, Tableau Book. We'll set the size maybe to something like 14-point font. And I can do it for the entire workbook. I can do it for tooltips. So maybe 14-point font there. Right, not changing the user interface at all, but changing the way that the font looks on the visualizations. And that's going to carry through every single one of these visualizations. So maybe a little bit better now. And now if I bring something like bedrooms out and we slice up the data, now I can start to see, okay, this is kind of what I would expect. You know, there are a few houses with one bedroom, a few more with two. Most houses have about 3. A few have 4, and just a few maybe have 5 or so. And in fact, I've been using this number of records. I'm going to rename this number of records just so that I know that this is my listings. So hold down, click and hold, and I can rename it right there. So this is my number of listings. All right. And notice something else that Tableau 10 is doing. Look at the title here. So I'm working with Sheet 3. The default title is Sheet 3, but it is seamlessly flowing right into the visualization. So in Tableau 9, you wouldn't even see the title by default, and when you showed it, it would be off by itself, kind of just floating up there. But the title comes through really nicely, and so I'll rename this and call this number of bedrooms. And then I'm ready to go on and take a look at the rest of the data. So I'll go on to a new sheet, sheet 4, title shows up right there. And let's take a look at something else. So maybe when these houses were listed. So again, I'll look at the number of listings, but now I just want to see, okay, when were these listed? So bring out the date and expand out by quarter and by month, and then I'm going to take the quarter away and maybe change it to a bar chart. And this again is kind of what you'd expect in a hot real estate market. There are a few houses that were listed way back in April, but as time has gone on, you see more and more houses that are still on the market. So those that were listed in May or June, there's still quite a few of those on the market, but they don't stay around long. So I might call this something like when it was listed. All right, and then I move on to something else here. And so I know when, I kind of know the number of bedrooms. I noticed that I have a field here called zip code, so I might be interested to know where these were listed. So Tableau recognizes zip code as a geographic field, and I double click it. And it pops it up there on the map. Anyone recognize the location? Dallas. All right. Good. So yeah, so here is, turns out we're looking at Dallas real estate, so maybe a little bit applicable to some of us. And so I've plotted the zip codes that comes up as a circle. If I bring something out like price and put that on color, I'm going to get a filled map. So every zip code gets filled in. Right now I'm looking at the sum of price, which probably isn't necessarily correct, because some of these zip codes maybe have 1 or 2 properties, some of them maybe have hundreds of properties or dozens of properties, and so adding them together really isn't all that meaningful. Let's change it to something like average, just to see the average values of homes in the Metroplex. And, you know, it's sample data, so don't get offended if your zip code looks a little bit too high or a little bit too low. Don't get worried. It is sample data, but kind of interesting. I can see some patterns here. So Tableau starts to show me things, and I can see, you know, we've got some zip codes where houses are kind of a little bit on the high end, and some zip codes where maybe they're not. And I can start to see the geographic location of that. So I've got something kind of interesting here. I could even turn on labels if I wanted to, just so I could see it. But here in a second, I'm going to put it on a dashboard where it's not going to look quite as good, so I'm going to take them off. And just as a little detour here, how many of you work with data where instead of zip codes or instead of counties, you have your own custom territories? Yeah, quite a few of you. So that's not uncommon, right? You have your own sales territories, or you have your own custom territories that you want to focus on. And sometimes those are made up of zip codes or counties. What Tableau 10 introduces is the idea that I can take these existing geographic things like zip codes or counties, and I can group those together to create my own custom territories. So maybe lasso select some here. We'll just select some of these maybe on this end. And once I've got one territory selected, I'm just going to hover over it and find this little group icon and group it. Okay, so far, this is what Tableau 9 would allow you to do. You could create groups in Tableau 9. In fact, the group shows up over here. One thing that you couldn't do in Tableau 9 is use the groups in calculations. But notice in Tableau 10, I can create a calculated field straight from a group. And I could do all kinds of things here. I could do if-then logic, case statements, just to figure out which group things belonged in. So that's actually a nice little feature that you might not notice at first, but it's great to know that it's there. All right, but the big feature that's really exciting in Tableau 10 is the idea that here I've got my price by zip code, and I'm color coding by region. And if I turn on my mark labels here, in fact, if I put price out here on label, just specifically, change it to average, I get the average price and I get it by zip code, which makes sense because zip code is here in the detail of the marks card and it's slicing out my data. But watch what happens when I take the zip code away. Now Tableau has recognized that that zip code grouping is a valid geographic feature. So I have a continuous area. In fact, it doesn't have to be continuous, it can be split up, but made up of the zip codes that I grouped, and another one there. And so each one of these allows me to not only slice the data by the group, but also to map the data by the group. And so what I've done is I've created an ad hoc territory. So if you have data where you have your own zip codes or counties or states, you can take those, group those together just like I did, and build your own custom territories that Tableau will know how to draw and display really well on a map. And then since it's a group, I can do whatever I want with a group, just like I could normally. I could rename these. So over here in the color legend, I'll just right click and say edit alias, and we'll call this maybe West, and we'll call the other one East. And now I've got 2 custom territories, and I could create as many custom territories as I had wanted to. In this case, I did 2. But let's go back to the idea of just putting the zip code on there. So I'm going to take the zip code, drop that back on the view, slice it up again, and then I'm going to take my groups off. So we'll look at things just by zip code, and I'll take the price and put that back on color. All right, so we're back to this view, and this view is where? All right, one more exploration of the data. So we'll create one more view. Sometimes when I'm looking at data like this, I like to know, is there any correlation of some of the measures? So in this case, I have price and I have the square footage of the individual addresses, and I want to know, is there any correlation between price and square footage? So maybe just double click on price, double click on size, and I'm going to get this nice scatter plot. Or at least it's on its way to being a nice scatter plot. Right now I've just got one mark. It's the sum of the price and the sum of the square footage. But if I slice that up by address, so if I bring address out here to the detail, now I get a mark for every address. And in fact, on the projector, I may even switch that from these little open circles to be sort of filled circles so that it's a little bit easier to see. And what I can now find, even with just a view like this, is I can find properties that are really big. And I can find properties that are really expensive. And I can find properties that are both. Or maybe I can find some properties that are really big, but not quite as expensive. And maybe those are some of the houses that I might be interested in looking at as a good investment. Or maybe not. We'll see. But then I find a property like this. So here's a great deal. I'll buy this one, 3,200 square feet for $3,000. What's going on here? What is it? Rent. So that's not what I could purchase the property for. That's what I would have to pay monthly just to live there. And in fact, if I look at the data, I do have a type field. So if I look at that, put that on color maybe, I do notice, yes, there are 4 rent houses and 4 sale houses. So instead of color, let's put that up on my filters, and we'll only look today at the ones that are for sale. So I say, okay, now those are gone, but that's great because now I can do the analysis that I really want. And in fact, just to make sure that I'm not looking at things incorrectly throughout the other views that we've already created, for example, those were impacting the average price per county, I need to make sure that I apply this to everything. So this little drop-down field here, and I say apply to worksheets. Now in Tableau 9, we had the ability to say everything using this data source would get filtered, or we could select the individual worksheets that we wanted, or we could say only this worksheet. But in Tableau 10, we get this new feature here saying filter everything that is using a related data source. So this is cross-data source filtering, the idea that I can take a filter and apply it to multiple data sources. So any other data sources that had the field type would get filtered by this. And you say, well, but one of my data sources has the field name type and another one has it labeled type of property. Well, no problem. Just like you do with data blending, go to data, edit relationships, and you can define a custom relationship to define which fields they go. So if it was type and it goes to category on another data source, no problem. So you can apply that filter across all the related data sources, and you can define what that relationship is. All right, so let's make sure we apply it to, in this case, everything using this data source. And in Tableau 9, or earlier, we have the capability of doing analytics. So on the Analytics tab, I could do all kinds of things to look at this data in even more detail and to understand it even better. So things like trend lines. So maybe I'm going to sell my house and I want to know where should it fall in terms of price, since I know the square footage. So I'll pick my model. So maybe we start with a linear model and say, yeah, there's just a sort of a one-to-one correlation between size and price. And if I have a 3,000 square foot house, at least I wish I did, then maybe I should sell it for something like 400,000, all other things being equal. Or I could take the trend line and say, yeah, let's pick a different model. Maybe it's exponential, and I want to convince my wife that we should add on to our house. And I say, look, every square foot of the house that we add on exponentially increases the price. And she says, yeah, check the model, probably not. So I say, well, okay, maybe it's logarithmic. At first people will pay more for a bigger house, but at some point there's a law of diminishing returns, and the more square footage you add, the less it is. Or maybe it's some sort of a polynomial relationship. Maybe it's a little bit more complex. So I could evaluate the trends, and I could understand kind of where I would predict that additional measurements might fall. Or I could start to say, where should I fall if I'm going to make a decision? But that's just one kind of analysis. That's just one kind of analytics, is trend modeling. So take the trend away. Tableau 10 introduces another kind of analytics, and that is clustering. So notice cluster shows up here under model, and I can drag and drop the cluster field here. And Tableau applies a clustering to the data to determine what are the groupings in the data. So I like to do this on scatter plots, but you can do this on any type of visualization. Just drag and drop the cluster, and we'll take a deeper dive into this later, but for now, just notice you get a list of variables. So right now it's using the price and the size to determine the clusters. That's what I had in the view. It's automatically determining the number of clusters, but I can change that if I want. So if I wanted to find 3 different groups of the data, not a problem at all for Tableau, 4, and so on. Now I have to have a little bit of understanding of what it's doing, and so definitely read up on the documentation when it comes out to make sure that what you're doing is still valid analysis. But we'll go back to the automatic, and you'll notice that it really is just sort of drawing a line here, which is what I would expect with 2 variables. The scatter plot is showing both variables, and so that's what I'd expect. But we'll take a deeper dive into clustering in the next session, and we'll see how other kinds of analysis can be done with clustering. For now, I'm going to close that out, and this new clusters field here, if I wanted to get that back, just edit clusters, it comes back. I can take these clusters and just drag them off, and now they're gone. And we'll see what else we can do with clusters in the next session. All right, so this is sort of my price price and size. And at this point, I've got I've got 4 different views, and if I wanted to put them together to show someone or to allow someone else to interact with them, I'm going to create a dashboard. So I click on New Dashboard and get a dashboard designer. It looks very similar to Tableau 9, but you'll see there are a few different things. There's a couple of different tabs. So I have the dashboard tab here, and I have a layout tab here. So notice that. I still have everything that I would expect, like the ability to drag sheets into the designer. So I've got all of my different sheets, and I can create this dashboard pretty easily. And maybe take that, put it down here, something like that. And I've got all the other different objects I can drag in, like the web object, or different containers or text or that sort of thing. And it's very easy to make it interactive. So a lot of times I'll log on to a real estate website and it has these filters, but they're just kind of your old 1990s style drop-down filters. I like things that are more visual and interactive, so let's just use this little icon here that says Use as Filter. And now I can select all the real estate that has 3 bedrooms just by clicking a bar. And I click the bar and I see where it is, I see when it was listed, I see the price and the size for all the 3-bedroom homes. And then I think to myself, well, you know what would be really nice is to be able to say where it is, because sometimes I have certain zip codes in mind of where I want to live, so I can filter pretty easily by selecting a zip code. And then I see, okay, yeah, so here we've only got just a few houses, but the average price is $500,000 or more, so probably won't be living there. And then I think, you know, if I really want to get a good deal on a house, what I need to do is I need to find out someone who's had their house on the market for a while and they're getting desperate for a buyer. So now I'll use this as a filter and I'll say, you know what, let's find anybody who has been having their house on the market since last August or before. So I select those. Now I can narrow that down, and then I can find the ones that are really good deals here. So I've got a nice dashboard that gives me a lot of ability to figure out what the data is and what kind of decision I want to make based on that data. But then I go and I publish it to Tableau server. And I thought my dashboard looked great, but then my boss gets on and he's using his little tablet and he says, yeah, that doesn't look so nice. And I said, what's wrong? Or he's using his phone, which is even worse. But Tableau 10 allows me to design specifically for my boss's phone. In fact, I can design for any type of device. Now we'll dig into this a little bit deeper in the next session, but for now I'll show you there is a device preview. So if I click on that, now I can see, okay, for a tablet, this is how it's going to look, at least until I do anything with it. And then I've got different models of tablets, so this is how it'll look on a generic tablet, but I could even say, what would it look like specifically on an iPad mini, or on an Amazon Kindle Fire, or on a Samsung Galaxy. So I've got all kinds of different options here, and then based on my selection, I can even say, what would it look like if it was switched between landscape or portrait mode? So now Tableau shows me that in landscape, my dashboard's going to show up okay, but if they switch to portrait, it's going to be kind of cut off, and they're going to have to sort of pan and zoom around, so that's probably not great. So I could work on that, and we'll take a look at how to do that. I've even got the ability to say, what would it look like with the Tableau mobile app versus just looking at it on the tablet's web browser. And so then I could look at tablet, I can look at desktop, I can even look at a phone. How would it look like on a phone? And here I realize I've even got a more significant problem, because if my boss is looking at this on his phone, no wonder he's frustrated. Now here's where it gets fun, because I can add a layout. So I say add a phone layout, and now I can customize this dashboard specifically for how I want it to look on a phone. So on the phone I say, well, you know, it's nice to be able to see the price and size correlation normally, but on the phone, that may just be too much. I'll take that out. And we need to sort of rearrange things. So I'm going to move the map down here. And in fact, and we'll take that legend and move it too. In fact, we also need to make sure that on the phone, it just fits to the width of the phone. And maybe give it a little bit more height, because I don't mind on the phone if you have to sort of swipe your finger and scroll down. That's no problem. So we'll give you 2 views to look at it first, and it's nice I can see the preview, and then you can scroll down and see the map too, and so that should work out pretty well. But the nice thing is that that is just my phone layout. If I go back and look at the default dashboard, that's how it's going to look by default. So if someone has a phone and they look at it, they'll see it like that. If they're looking at it on any other device, they'll see it like that. And we'll see how you can create different layouts for all kinds of different devices and save that so that when someone logs on the Tableau server with their phone or with their tablet or with their desktop, they get to see the dashboard just like you want them to see it. And they get to interact with it just like you want them to interact with it. So that is an overview and a demo of Tableau 10.